Actor network theory is just one way of looking at community development. And to be honest with you, I think it's a relatively unique way of looking at it and not something I hear many of my colleagues thinking about. In the coming weeks, you'll hear about other models such as asset building, and those can be used as either alternatives to this lens I've shown you over the last few weeks or in combination with it. Actor network theory is not a precise recipe. It's not like baking muffins where you know the exact ingredients, the amounts that you need, and the precise steps that you'll take. It's much better suited to something where we may not always know all the ingredients available to us or what the people receiving the ingredients are going to want at the end and exactly how it should all come together. It's much more like the stir fry in the bottom picture. And because of that, we really get something good out of A&T, which is a strong sense of all the ingredients we want to bring in, but also the challenge of constantly needing to pay attention to it. It's not like we can go off and read a book like we can while the muffins are in the oven. It's going to take constant attention as this production is being made. Actor network theory is not only challenging because it lacks a specific starting point, but you could argue that the work is never completely done. There is no singular finishing point. Think about our public school system. It's hard to imagine that public schools are a product of a community initiative, but they are in fact. It wasn't too many generations ago that it was not customary for everybody to go to grade 12 and for the community to pay for education as an automatic function of our taxes. And in fact, if you look in other parts of the developed world, this is still not always completely done. So we might think, well, that work is done. And yet, if you look at your community, you'll see that we have a publicly funded body in each one called a Board of Education. We have elected people. We have standards of the way we actually oversee the spending of money in our school districts and the regulations placed on teachers and on the way that curriculum is developed. There's a lot of ongoing work to make sure that the system remains responsive to the community. And if we didn't do that, we might start to see it fall apart like we have in countries that have experienced labor disputes, like, for example, in Oaxaca, Mexico, or wars such as we saw in the former Yugoslavia. In those places, even though education existed, the fact that there wasn't a cohesive community of practice keeping it safe and making it continue to be relevant, they started to fall apart. And in some cases, they did so in literally violent ways. So A&T doesn't really ever satisfy the people who want to say, when are we done? Instead, it looks more like jobs change or jobs get handed off to other people. Those are sort of the exit ramps that we need to think about. If you're working with people, or if you personally really like a sequence of set steps, it can feel chaotic to do this work, and that might be difficult for you to bring people together. In this particular project, everybody in your school group or your class group is considered to be at the core team. But in real life, that isn't always the way. You might not need to be at the core of the particular community initiative. You might be engaged for what I call piecework. Piecework is a part of the puzzle, a place where somebody might specialize. For example, they might be money managers, or they might be the people who keep a project moving forward on the timeline. They might use something like a Gantt chart or a flow chart to do that. They might be experts in community engagement, or they might be the people who help you with technology, like, for example, a website. People doing that piecework may not always need to know how this all fits together. Many of them simply won't care and won't have the time to sit down and hear your full spiel. You'll just need to give them enough information for them to contextualize their work, especially if they're paid. However, I want to make a point that just because somebody is paid doesn't mean that's enough to make them care. So you have to be able to give enough interest level, or intéressement, if you remember our term, to make people care about the work so that they do it at a good level of quality. Actor network theory is not particularly a scientific approach. What I mean by that is it doesn't go and explore why something is happening and then try to fix it at that level. Here's why I actually like that about actor network theory. First, this process of doing research to understand the why behind some things is in of itself very consumptive of people power, time, and money. And sometimes we just want to get down to business and apply what we already know will help our community. We don't mind the fact that having a block party is something we know will be good for our community, or putting more daycares in a neighborhood will help our community. We don't always want to spend a ton of time going back and doing tremendous research. And there's another reason why. Often, when we look at things at a community level and start to peel back why they're happening, we start to realize that the issues that are underlying that issue or that problem are not specific to our community. If mission was to see why are we seeing homelessness on the increase, it wouldn't be something specific to mission, or even frankly to British Columbia, and perhaps not even true of Canada as a unit. So we would be spending a lot of time trying to understand something that at the end of the day, we wouldn't have the power to fix as one small part of this whole big network. Instead, getting active in doing project work can actually sometimes give us tools that we can share with other communities. Once we start to do something and it catches on, other communities might pick it up and adopt it. So actor network theory is not really a theory at all, and it's funny actually that the actual progenitors of this theory have since joked that the only thing in actor network theory that is actually a really good descriptor of what it is the hyphen between actor and network. It's more of a construct, or simply a way of looking at your work. So you can learn and you can make scientific research part of your actual process. We've talked about data collection in the past. We've talked about using academics as partners. So remember, that can still be part of your community initiative, but you don't necessarily need to do all that research before you start doing other community work. Actor network theory is never a one-time process. Sometimes people expect that they're going to have one community event, or they're going to talk to the community about a particular issue, such as stigma, one time, and it'll be fixed. But it's not going to be that way. It's just like being a teacher or a parent. You're going to repeat things over and over again. It's going to take lots of revisiting. You're going to have to go back and try things and review, and not everything you do will work. And so it's really important to be okay at collecting data and making adjustments. Even when you're doing something super well, often as time passes, it'll start to lose its efficacy. So don't hold on too tightly to the names you give things or to who's in charge of what thing. It's about evolving. And the more you're open to that, the more likely that your project will spread and be sustained. There is no guarantee of results. But again, I would point out to people that there's no guarantee of results with any approach. And often there are byproducts of this work that are unexpected results. So there are times we've gone out and tried to create a result, and we didn't quite get there. But instead, something else has been a byproduct of it. Earlier in the class, I used the example of an app that we intended to do that was around food sharing, but the technology didn't work. As a result, we did not succeed in our intended goal. But what we did get was a bunch of data that helped us to do some food security planning and to look at poverty, homelessness, and at-risk youth in some unique ways. So that data ended up being a nice byproduct. Actor network theory can be difficult for other people to grasp, but again, you don't have to go out and explain it to everybody else. That's why we've worked so hard at using semiotics and metaphor and those elevator speeches as a way of getting people to really find a way to come on board. They don't have to be with you for long in every case. Some people are going to write you a check. Some people are going to retweet something on social media. Some people will volunteer. Some people will drop off the people who are volunteering. It's really about making sure that you get what you can out of people in those moments, and also about making sure that you're not accidentally creating opponents or torpedoes to your work. Sometimes people don't actively support you, but at the same time, they don't actively fight against a concern, and that can be useful as well. So actor network theory offers a quick and effective way to make sure that you're staying on target by examining the ingredients, including the relationships and the ideas that you have. Don't worry about it if it doesn't look the same as the other groups. Don't worry about it if something in your group is harder to figure out than in another group. You'll find this every single time. Sometimes it's harder to figure out who the people are. In other cases, it's harder to describe how you fix the relationships. That's just normal. So here's some important lessons to wrap us up. I really like the idea of reflexiveness or layers in your process. For example, when we worked in a program that was meant to help people who were homeless to find new skills, they ended up being not only effective in helping themselves, but they ended up being really helpful as community guides. And then they expressed a desire to go out and actually recruit new people and help them to take on a new role within the program. They wanted to be mentors. And so every single time we were successful, we were also building capacity in our system. That's what I love to do, is if you can find a way for the things you're doing to help feed the next things you're doing, that's reflexiveness. And I like the metaphor here of Escher's drawing, so that one hand is drawing the other and the cycle is constantly moving forward. Another one would be the snowball that keeps gathering more snow and getting more and more momentum. The second important lesson is illustrated in the picture to the bottom right. That's a picture of former President Lyndon Johnson and one of his biggest enemies as he was considering running for president, and that's J. Edgar Hoover, at that time the director of the FBI. So they were really fierce opponents, and J. Edgar Hoover was a very important person at that time in history who was really petitioning against things like communism, and he was really infiltrating people's rights. Johnson did something that surprised people, and he actually put Hoover into his cabinet and kept him in his government. And people asked him why. And Lyndon Johnson had one of the more colorful quotes in American history, and I will change it a little bit. He said, "I would rather have him inside my tent urinating out than outside my tent urinating in." It's a really important thing to understand what he means by that fairly pithy, sorry, terrible pun, quote there. The idea is to bring the people who might be your biggest torpedoes into alliance with you. Find ways of working with people who might otherwise seem like they're not doing the same work. Because if you're pulling against each other, everything all of you are doing will fall apart. So don't only think about working with government. Think about things like the faith community, educational community, the business community, child and youth groups, service groups, and even neighborhood constituencies that don't have an official name. If you see people having block parties in your area, that's a group, even if they haven't given themselves an official name. A third one is to consider how you'll address some of these things that happen in every community project that I've ever seen. First, burnout. People come really excited to something, but after a while, the work starts to take its toll, especially if you have difficulties come along, for example, like funding crises, or in the world we all live in now, COVID. So we have to really think about, how do we give people a chance to get a break, to get help, to take leave from a job for a period of time, or to move out of a job before it gets to be too stressful. And remember, we all like new things, novel things. So how do we keep things fresh when we know that's really important for people to stay engaged? Watch out for signs of conflict. Human beings love to love each other, but we also quickly find reasons to be in disputes. And sometimes I've seen people be in fights over things that were absolutely ridiculous. In one case, I was running a program and a lady became so angry that I thought they might get into a physical altercation. And she was angry because her colleague had cleaned a fish tank. And the colleague did that thinking she was being helpful. It's amazing how much we'll sometimes protect turf. So the maintenance work we do to help deal with conflict early on, really important. If you ignore conflict, it'll get worse. We've talked about it before, but measure and report your results and always tell the truth. If the data doesn't tell the story you'd like it to tell, explain why. Explain what you think you're going to do about it. Don't hide it ever. Think about the sustainability of your project. You want to move on from it ultimately or retire. If you leave and the project dies, you haven't been entirely successful. So think about bringing in people that might make you a little nervous at times because they seem a little intimidating. They're so skilled, they're so dynamic. Those are the people you want. And if they come in and they own it, then when you leave, the project will continue. That's what we mean by successorship. And finally, celebrate success. There is no moment that's too small to celebrate. Say thank you, give cards, bring muffins, and put things out on social media to celebrate successes. It could be one person that you've helped. It could be that you accomplished a goal, that you saved money, that you got something done faster than you thought, or even that something was just fun. When you have those moments, celebrate them. Because when you're working in human services, we often miss the biggest and most important moments in our career. We keep waiting for that big hurrah of when somebody will have a monumental or milestone moment. We see them graduate, or we see them come out of a recovery facility, or they rent their first home. But we often are not around to see those moments. If we've been really successful, they might have moved on before we actually have finished working with them. So it's important to measure the ones that don't necessarily get the milestones or the big press, and especially within your group. It's a really generous thing to identify in other people that you appreciate the work they've done. One of my customs is very simply, when I can, I sign off on my emails by saying thank you with an exclamation point. It's just a little thing, and I doubt that very many people notice it. But I want people to know genuinely and authentically that I see them and I value them as they help in this work. And so that's the end of this video, except that I need to say I've been super impressed by the work you've been doing. And I am so excited to see you all out working in this field later on. You are going to be wonderful. And I really thank you for the way that you help me to have confidence in the people coming into this work. Your creativity and your teamwork and your curiosity have been fantastic. Onward, we'll see you in a week. And we know we're going to see some great stuff. Thank you.